can a local law passed by a town board illegally survive challenge just because of the statute of limitations? To find out, you have to read Hoehmann versus Town of Clarkstown, but it's 4 pages. Don't have time for that? I've got you covered. This is TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read, where I cover New York Court of Appeals cases, and I try to do it in 5 minutes or less. This is the episode on the case of Hoehmann versus Town of Clarkstown. The citation for this case is 2023 New York Slip Opinion 02750, published by the New York Court of Appeals on May 19th of 2023. The issue in this case is whether a local law that was illegally passed can survive because of the statute of limitations. To understand and appreciate the significance of this case and where it fits in, you have to understand 3 different things. The first is that municipal home rule law, this is a statute, New York statute, state law, municipal home rule law, section 23, says that, this is the quote, a local law shall be subject to mandatory referendum if it abolishes, transfers, or curtails any power of an elective officer. And only then, it only becomes law if it is approved by a majority of the qualified electors that vote upon the proposition. So if you're going to pass a law that affects how people are elected, it has to be at a referendum, and it has to prevail by a majority of the people who vote on the referendum. The next thing you have to understand is what a statute of limitations is. A statute of limitations is a rule that says if you're going to sue on something, you have a certain amount of time between the period when the act happened and when the lawsuit happened. If you exceed that, you're too late. You're barred from suit by the statute of limitations. So it's a time limit on bringing a lawsuit. And the last thing you have to know is what Article 78's proceedings are. An Article 78 proceeding is a kind of a lawsuit, civil lawsuit, that says that a public body or a public officer exceeded their authority or did something wrong. That's an Article 78. And importantly, the statute of limitations on an Article 78 claim is 4 months. Okay, so what's the facts of this case? The facts are, in Rockland County, New York, which is across the Hudson River, basically pretty close to the city, but across the Hudson River, there's a town called Clarkstown, New York. It's by New City. In 2014, the town board of Clarkstown adopted local law 9-2014, which purported, so they passed this law, which purported to set an 8-year term limit for the board for all Clarkstown elected officials and required a supermajority vote of the town board to repeal. So 2 parts of this law, 8-year term limit, and only the town board can repeal it by a supermajority. 7 years later, okay, so now 7 years have elapsed, more than the 4 months. 7 years later, a lawsuit was filed by the first person who was impacted by the law, a person on the board named Hoehmann. Hoehmann sued seeking a declaration declaring that law that the board passed was invalid. It was not the product of a referendum, which municipal law required. But the defense was, wait a second, you're saying that we as a town board did something wrong. That's in Article 78, and there's a 4-month statute of limitations. You're too late. You don't get to go to court and argue this. So what happens? It goes to the trial court, the Supreme Court. They say this is really in Article 78. What you're alleging here is that the town board exceeded their authority. You had 4 months to bring this kind of a claim. You're barred by the statute of limitations. It goes up to the appellate division. They reverse it. They say that this is a substantive issue, and they draw a distinction. They say substantive issues are not Article 78 required. Procedural issues are Article 78 required. So if you're saying that they did something substantively wrong, that the law is substantively deficient, that's not barred by the statute of limitations of Article 78. If it's procedural, it is. They say the law was never actually enacted, so it's invalid on its face. It goes to the Court of Appeals, and here the Court of Appeals kind of takes a sidestep. They say the right to vote is one of our most fundamental rights in a constitutional system that we have. They say forget the substantive procedural fight that the appellate division latched onto. They say according to the municipal home rule law 23, the law cannot become operative through the mere passage of time. It's only operative. It's only a law if it's passed properly pursuant to that statute, municipal home rule law. So because this law lacks operative effect until it's presented to and approved by a referendum, meaning the whole populace gets to vote on it, under these unique circumstances, it's not barred by the statute of limitations. When they say under these unique circumstances, it feels to me a little bit like they couldn't draw a test that would adequately keep this in and keep the other ones out. So they basically say on these unique circumstances, on this particular factual scenario, it's not valid and we don't have to worry about the statute of limitations. They don't really explain beyond that why. And that's the case of Hoehmann versus Town of Clarkstown. Have a good day. If you like what you just saw and want to see more just like it, please hit like or subscribe to let me know.